Welcome to the AWC Trust-sponsored webinar introducing our latest endeavor to control healthcare costs, the Dependent Eligibility Verification Audit. My name is Carol Wilmus, and I'm the Program Manager for the AWC Employee Benefit Trust. I'll be one of your co-presenters this morning, or this afternoon. Your Board of Trustees are committed to containing your healthcare costs. As elected officials, they are equally committed to the appropriate use of public funds. That is, paying premium only for those dependents who are eligible. It is with these strategic goals in mind that the trustees contracted with an outside firm, Aon Hewitt, to address dependent eligibility verification. Over the course of the next hour, you will learn about the necessity for a dependent eligibility audit, discover the value to employers, employees, and the AWC Trust, and review the audit process and expected timeline. We have a lot of information to work through, but we also want to make sure your questions get answered. Please email your question in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and one of us will address your question at the end of this presentation. And now, I'll hand over the mic to my co-presenter, Melissa Newman of Aon Hewitt. Thanks for being here with us today, Melissa.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you all for joining us today as we run through the information regarding the AWC Trust Dependent Verification. My name is Melissa Newman. I am a client manager with Aon Hewitt, and I will be the project lead for this dependent verification project. Today we're going to take some time and walk you through the background on dependent verification, how it will benefit the AWC Trust, the employers, and the members. We will walk through the dependent verification process, go through some examples of documentation requirements, and the timeline of the project. Go ahead and begin with the background. As Carol stated, we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. What is a dependent eligibility verification review? In short, a dependent review is an audit of an entire dependent population to verify that enrolled dependents are eligible to participate in the plan. The full review of submitted documents to validate eligibility. It is a highly visible undertaking, and all plan participants will receive communications that are easy to understand, explaining the review process, and will provide instructions on how to validate dependent eligibility. The overall goal of the project is to ensure that all eligible dependents remain on the plan. This is a data-intensive process, and all responses and documents are managed in a very secure and highly confidential environment. Aon Hewitt is SAS 70 certified on an annual basis. Our infrastructure is tested regularly, and to date there have been no security breaches. We take your participants' security very, very important, make it very important. Started. Why do we conduct a dependent audit? Essentially, we are finding that as many as 5 to 7% of dependents enrolled in a health plan are ineligible to participate. There is a high likelihood that these dependents are enrolled due to a misinterpretation of the plan's rules. They don't fully understand who an eligible dependent is, and have unknowingly added or failed to remove a dependent who is no longer eligible. Occasionally, we do find instances of fraud, but more often than not, it is truly a misunderstanding of the plan's rules. Therefore, conducting a dependent verification project benefits all of those involved. It benefits the employers by reducing employer premiums through elimination of ineligible members. It helps to possibly lower future rate increases. Importantly, it establishes equity across membership, and it sets new practices to manage this eligibility on a go-forward basis. To the AWC Trust, a dependent verification project helps to make sure that the plan is in compliance and that only claims that are attached to an eligible dependent are paid. It helps to contain costs so that only qualified expenses count toward an experience rate. And it also helps stability and growth. It helps to attract and retain cities for favorable claim experience and helps to control future increases. To the member, this is a benefit because it helps to effectively communicate the eligibility requirements. It has potential for less increase on the employee contributions since claims will be reduced by removing ineligible dependents. And finally, it's a fairness to all members. Make sure that no one is paying for an eligible dependent and all participants are adhering to the same set of rules. Let's take a look at Aon Hewitt's experience with dependent verification across government sectors. What we have here is a slide that gives you an idea of our ineligible dependent percentage across our government sector. Our average employer cost per dependent on an annual basis is $3,600 per year. That's a conservative estimate for the AWC Trust given the richness of the plan. On average, we find a percent of 6.5% of the dependents enrolled are ineligible to participate in the plan. And to date, we have audited more than 1 million dependents. Percent of ineligible dependents, as demonstrated in this pie chart, will show you that the majority of the dependents we find to be ineligible to participate are dependent children. Some of this is due to a misinterpretation of the rule and maintaining coverage for a stepchild, for example, who is no longer eligible, or a dependent who is in your home who is not under the order of a court as a legal ward. We also see a high rate of spouses left on the plan, sometimes as a misinterpretation of a divorce decree. Again, these are all instances of an employee's misunderstanding of the plan's rules. And to help give you an idea of the types of dependents that we find ineligible on the plan. The next slide gives you an overall view based on size from state and local government results. The AWC Trust would fall more into Group 3, the 5,000 to approximately 10,000 employees who are covering dependents. Here you can see that Aon Hewitt sees an average rate of 6.42% in eligible dependents. How does that translate to savings? On this next slide, we give you an estimated cost avoidance for the AWC employers. So this is how it relates to you. We have approximately 9,567 employees with covered dependents. That translates to 20,000, a little over 20,000 covered dependents. We're using the annual average employer per dependent cost rate of $3,600. Again, that is a conservative number based on the richness of the AWC Trust plan. You can see that we've calculated savings based on a low-end percent of ineligible dependents discovered, 5%, which is a very conservative estimate. That would result in a $3.6 million savings. The high side, 7%, resulting in a $5 million savings. This illustrates for you the purpose of a dependent verification project and how it can benefit everyone. Next, we will take a look at the dependent verification process and give you an idea of what it will be like from the employee's experience. Included in the dependent verification project will be all employees who are covering dependents on the medical, dental, and vision plan. The plan eligibility across all lines is consistent, so the same paperwork will satisfy all plan enrollment. For dependents who are unable to verify by the end of the project, benefits for all plans will be terminated, including supplemental life. This project will include active employees only. We will not be sending communications to retirees or COBRA participants. In addition to validating dependent eligibility, we will also be capturing any missing dependent Social Security numbers as required by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We will be sending a communication to employees with dependents who are missing dependent Social Security numbers in an attempt to collect that information. However, that information is not required to complete dependent verification. Employees will be able to submit the information for a dependent Social Security number through Dependent Verification Services secure fax line using a form that will be supplied or through their secure online web portal. In addition to verifying eligibility and capturing any missing dependent Social Security numbers, we will also be helping to identify dependents who are covered under the plan under a qualified medical child support order. Currently, this information does not reside with the trust. To help proactively identify these dependents, employers will be asked to send a list of these dependents to the trust staff. A letter will be distributed to each trust employer very soon. The verification process will begin by requesting documentation from each employee. The employee will receive communications at their home address, and each communication will contain a barcode for tracking purposes. The employee may use the information sent to their home to submit their documents. For example, included will be a fax cover sheet. The fax cover sheet will have the employee-specific barcode on it, and it is important to remember that employees should use only their own fax cover sheet when submitting documentation. The employee will submit documentation to the Dependent Verification Services using one of three methods. The employee may mail documents to Dependent Verification Services. Note that original documents should not be sent, as they will not be returned to participants. This is noted in all communications that are sent to the employee. The employee may also fax documents to a secure fax line. And finally, they may choose to upload documentation directly to Dependent Verification Services via a secure employee web portal. Once Dependent Verification Services reviews the documentation, it is reviewed to verify eligibility. If all enrolled dependents are successfully verified, the employee will receive a notice of completion. If we are unable to verify 100% of the dependents and additional documentation is needed, we will send a notice to the employee requesting the missing information. All documentation stored will be disposed of following the completion of the verification period. All paper documentation is destroyed 150 days following receipt to protect employee privacy. As mentioned earlier, Aon Hewitt is SAS 70 certified, and our infrastructure is tested on an annual basis. Here is a visual of the verification process overview. Employees mail, fax, or upload their documentation to Aon Hewitt's secure facility. For assistance, they may contact our customer care service, which will be available to the employee throughout the process. Or they may elect to use the Internet. Through the Internet, the secure employee web portal, the employee can identify the dependents who are subject to verification, upload documentation directly to Dependent Verification Services, the real-time status of their dependents verification throughout the process, obtain copies of written communications, and email the Dependent Verification Service Customer Care Center. Finally, you have the Dependent Verification Team. We are a team of trained dependent verification colleagues who review and process the documentation. We will prepare reports, create instructions for the dropping of dependents, and manage the security for all employees. The next few slides take a look at eligible dependents. The eligible dependents include, but are not limited to, legal spouse, state-registered domestic partners, non-registered domestic partners in jurisdictions who offer biological children, adopted children, stepchildren, legal wards, and children who are eligible for coverage under a qualified medical child support order. Ineligible dependents would include former spouses or former domestic partners, or individuals who are not biological step or adopted children, or children for whom the employee is not the court-appointed legal guardian, or children who are over the age of 26 who have not been medically certified as disabled. If an employee has an ineligible dependent enrolled in the plan, the employee will be encouraged to disenroll any eligible dependent during an amnesty phase. The AWC Trust will offer full amnesty with no repercussions. However, employers may have a personnel policy or collective bargaining agreement that allows for other action to be taken. Employees may sign into the web portal to determine who is enrolled, or contact the Dependent Verification Service Center. During the official verification process, employees may self-report an ineligible dependent. Employees would contact the Dependent Verification Services team, request an opt-out form. Once that opt-out form is completed and returned to Dependent Verification Services, Dependent Verification Services will notify the AWC Trust, who will in turn provide the information back to the employer. Coverage for self-reported ineligible dependents will be terminated at the end of the month in which they are reported. At the conclusion of the project, a final report will be provided to the employer with any other ineligible dependents reported. The employer report will include a termination confirmation for each employee to be placed in their personnel file. Prior to terminating benefits, it is encouraged for employers to confirm that there is not a qualified medical child support order in effect. Any dependents who are removed from coverage because of lack of proof will not be eligible for COBRA coverage. In the final communication that is sent to employees with dependents who are subject to being dropped from the plan, information about individual plans will be provided. This information is coming from the AWC Trust. These are not individual plans that are supported by Aon Hewitt. Now we will look at an example of dependent verification documentation requirements. Proof of dependent status is really twofold. First, we want to confirm and validate that the relationship was initially existed. For example, a government-issued marriage certificate. In addition, we need to prove that the relationship still exists today. So in addition to the government-issued marriage certificate, we would request the 2011 or 2012 federal tax return, front page only, showing the marital relationship. Employees will be instructed to black out any sensitive information, such as Social Security numbers and or any monetary values. We will also include an example of this in the communication sent to the employee's home. Let's take a look at an employee who has a spouse and 2 children enrolled in the plan. To verify Jane, who is the employee's spouse, we would request the government-issued marriage certificate to validate the relationship, when the relationship began, and the 2011 or 2012 federal tax return. This would validate the current status of that relationship. For Tommy, who is a biological child, we would require the government-issued birth certificate. This would be to validate age and to validate the relationship between Tommy and the employee. Susie, who is a stepchild, we would require the government-issued birth certificate to validate age and to validate the relationship between Susie and Jane. Finally, we would request the same documents that we would to validate a marriage, the government-issued marriage certificate, and a 2011 or 2012 federal tax return. Please note that the marriage certificate and the tax return would only need to be submitted one time in this instance, and we would apply that information to both dependents. If all documents were successfully received, a notice of completion would be sent to the employee and no further action would be required. If documents were missing, a notice of incorrect documentation would then be sent to the employee outlining what documents are still required to complete the verification of all dependents. If the employee has questions regarding dependent verification or needs assistance with documents, they have many tools and resources available. The Dependent Verification Customer Care Center has an inbound and outbound call center that is available from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time. We encourage all employees with questions to be sent to Dependent Verification Services. There are many document requirements and alternate document options are available for almost all document requirements. There will be unique situations, and again, we encourage you to send those employees to Aon Hewitt Dependent Verification Services for assistance. In addition to the Customer Care Center, we also have an AT&T language line assistance available, and TTY is also available through AT&T if we have hearing impaired participants. The Custom Secure Employee Web Portal will also be available, and this information will be communicated in the initial communication going to employees. On the portal, employees can check dependent verification status, review document requirements, review frequently asked questions. They can also access a resource library of county clerk and state offices if they need to order a vital record. This information is also available through Dependent Verification Service Center. Employees can upload documents to the web portal. They can also email Dependent Verification Services through the secure web portal. Aon Hewitt uses a smart technology to help identify employees who might be struggling to provide correct documentation. If an employee is struggling to provide the correct documentation and verify 100% of their dependents enrolled in the plan, Aon Hewitt will assign an eligibility advocate to assist the employee. This becomes a single point of contact for the employee to help them through the verification project. Employees should always be routed to Dependent Verification Services if they have any questions. As noted previously, there are many alternate document options, including alternate options for foreign employees or those who have foreign documents. Any fees that an employee might incur for obtaining documentation, such as a birth certificate or a marriage certificate, is the responsibility of the employee. The next slide provides a timeline of events. On April 16th, a notice was sent to participating employers about the upcoming audit. Today, we are conducting the webinar to explain the process. Beginning May 3rd, we will generate the amnesty notification that will be released to employees. This notice will contain information on how to access the web portal to identify those dependents who are subject to verification. It will also provide the information regarding removing an ineligible dependent. And finally, it will provide information to link to the Aon Hewitt security and privacy policy. On 5/21, we will send a formal verification request notice to employees. This will contain the dependents list, a list of all eligible dependent types and document requirements, and instructions for submitting those documents to the Dependent Verification Service Center. In addition, we will provide a faxed cover sheet and dependent coupon to assist with document submission. A reminder that employees should only use their designated faxed cover sheet to submit their documents, as each page is barcoded with specific information about the employee. On June 18th, we will send a reminder notice to employees who have not completed the verification process. The deadline to complete verification will be July 22nd, 2013. This is the initial communicated deadline. We understand that some employees may have extenuating circumstances and some employees may procrastinate. Therefore, we are providing an additional grace period. On July 23rd, following the initial deadline, we will send an initial termination notice to employees who have not completed the verification. In this notice, we will communicate the grace period. The grace period deadline will be August 16, 2013. Dependents who are not verified by the grace period deadline will fail verification and will be reported back to the employers for benefit termination. August 31st is the date ineligible dependents will be removed from plans. Key messages are the verification of dependent eligibility is the trust's fiduciary responsibility so that they're in compliance with the plan's eligibility requirements. Ineligible dependents do increase the overall cost for everyone. All correspondence, all questions should be sent to the Dependent Verification Service Center. The phone number will be released to all members once the amnesty notice has been mailed. All of the data is managed and processed within a secure environment, including the destruction of all documents, and security is taken very seriously. A security and privacy policy is available to all employees on the Secure Employee web portal and can be made available to you. At this time, I will turn the presentation back over to Carol for any closing remarks and to address any questions.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. The last point, if problems arise with a collective bargaining agreement, please contact the AWC trust staff immediately. I do want to let you know that we have contacted Summit Law Group for their opinion on whether there would be a valid case for a grievance or unfair labor practice, and they have indicated to us that they did not see where there would be grounds for success on either count. It's not to say that a bargaining unit would not push back. So please let us know if that's the instance for you, and we will work with you directly on how to resolve that. I have asked Summit Law Group possibly to help us out if that does arise. So let us know if that's the case. I want to thank you all for attending today's webinar on the Dependent Eligibility Verification Audit. As you can imagine, this is a very important project for all trust employers, our employees, and the Board of Trustees with many layers of value. We want to express a special thanks to you in HR, finance, clerk treasurers, whatever role you have there at City Hall for supporting the process. It's very important that we do have your support throughout this. A special thanks goes to our presenter today, Melissa Newman from Aon Hewitt. So thanks, Melissa. And now we'll address some of your Oh, yeah, you're welcome. And now we're going to address some of your questions. First up is from Elizabeth Linda Jamie, and if an employee wants to have HR fax their forms, can we say no? And we strongly encourage that you do say no, that you have the employee do it themselves. Again, we want to make sure that all of the paperwork, Melissa has stressed this throughout, I'll stress again, that the paperwork the employee has is unique to them, including the fax cover sheet. They're barcoded with a unique identifier to each employee. So just as a reminder to ask a question, you can type in your question by either pressing on the tab Q&A. It'll bring up the question and answer section. You'll type it, it'll show up in the lower left-hand side. Okay, another question. Can we have a copy of the presentation? And the copy of the presentation, as well as this webinar, is being recorded, will be on the AWC Trust website in the members only section, and also will be in For Your Health electronic newsletter, which will be mailed out on Thursday, May 2nd. Okay. Next question from Peggy Hammer, it looks like. Will results be shared with Northwest administrators to coordinate with vision and dental coverage from non-AWC sources? And the answer to that, Peggy, is no. This is an AWC trust audit, not a Teamsters audit. You can, however, the employer will know the dependents that we are taking off of your plan. We'll share that with you, frankly, a month in advance, probably mid-July, just so you can do a double check with the employees to make sure that they haven't forgotten to respond. So maybe one more nudge from you if you wish. And then in August, we'll be notifying you again of who that final list of dependents will be coming off the plan and will be impacted by the September bill. So you'll know who those dependents are. You can go ahead and share that with Teamsters if you like and have those dependents disenrolled. Okay. Hi, Nancy. Your question is, will the information about individual plans prepared by AWC be available on the AWC website? They are, the plans are listed as well as the contact numbers in the final notice. We could certainly include something on our website just as a resource for you. So yeah, that's a really good suggestion. We'll make sure that happens. Oh, good question. Melissa, this will be a good question for you to answer from Lee in Lake Forest Park. What documentation is required for domestic partners?
Absolutely. So for domestic partners, documentation requirements would be very similar to that of a legal spouse. We would want the domestic partner registration form. That would act as the document to validate the formation of the relationship. And then we would want a current proof of joint ownership. So a document that lets us know that the couple is still currently involved in a relationship. So a bank statement, credit card statement, mortgage statement, lease agreement, something issued within the past 6 months that shows us the current status of that relationship. And again, if that information is not available from the domestic partner, they would contact the Dependent Verification Services for alternate document options.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. So the next question from Jodine from Enumclaw. After this audit is underway, will it be a requirement to provide a marriage license and a birth certificate for new enrollees? And Jodine, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking it. Yes, the AWC Trust does plan to now instill this as a process moving forward. And most officially, it will be implemented January 1, 2014. It will be included in our benefit booklets. So it's very well communicated to our employees about what is expected in order for them to enroll. This will help us to not have to conduct a DEVA, Dependent Eligibility Verification Audit, every 2 years. This will be an instilled process and will ensure that only eligible dependents are enrolled from here on out. Okay. So another question from Elizabeth, Linda, and James is, if an employee has a dependent dropped, but later is found to be eligible, do we have to wait for open enrollment to re-enroll the dependent? We do have a kind of a case-by-case appeal process that will be instilled, and so we'll have to handle that on a case-by-case. We'll certainly continue to work with the employee and with the jurisdiction we want to make sure that eligible dependents are kept on the plan. So I could see us, making that coverage continuous and not waiting until the open enrollment period. But as you have heard from Melissa, this is, basically 4 solid months of monthly communications to employees asking them for their help in responding. There's going to be unusual cases that are going to have difficulty in getting documents. So we would be more than willing to work with employers on doing so. Okay. And Cynthia Schaefer has asked the question, what paperwork will be required for opposite sex domestic partners? And Melissa, do you want to go ahead and field that one, or would you like me to handle that one?
I can take it, Carol. For those for those jurisdictions who offer coverage to opposite sex domestic partners, we would just require the opposite sex domestic partner documentation that was originally completed by that couple, along with their either current federal tax return or their or a proof of joint ownership. Very similar to what we're requiring from a legal spouse or from a domestic partner of the same sex. So they're all treated the same. Proof that the relationship was initially formed and proof that the relationship is still intact today.
Yes. Thanks, Melissa.
Awesome.
So the next question is from Jackie Rogers. Hi, Jackie. What about new hires that will be enrolled during this audit? Should we as employers ask them for this documentation? That's a good question, Jackie, and we've asked that of ourselves internally. And frankly, I think to keep things as simple as we possibly can, the audited employees who have dependents as of this point in time will be subject to the audit. Those new enrollees, we will not be expecting to comply with the new policy during this interim. So we're basically kind of giving up, I guess, audit control of new hires between now and the end of the year. But after the first of the year, when we have opportunity to very clearly communicate our expectations to everyone through benefit booklets moving forward, then we will expect the paperwork to be supplied at that time. So trying to keep this as simple as we possibly can. As you can imagine, this is quite a paperwork undertaking. Okay, so the next question, there was discussion of no repercussions during the grace period. What will happen after the grace period? And I think in one of Melissa's slides, we had referenced that the trust, and this is also indicated in the letters that go to the employees, that the trust does have reserved the right to take action with regard to claims. I have to say, again, from our perspective in simply addressing this audit, that dependents that come off of the plan at the end of August, we're not going to go back and collect premium, and we're not going to intentionally go back and take back claims, but we do reserve the right to do so. I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if it was not adequate enough. Okay, next question. For those of us who may have been transferred to HR and don't know who has a qualified medical court support order, how will we know which employees have such an order? And Anne, I would I would guess that your payroll department, your finance department, would have that information because those kinds of orders require a payroll deduction, typically, or a payroll mandate. So that would be my guess. If you have any other questions on that, please feel free to give us a call. Would you have anything more to add to that, Melissa?
For those dependents that we can identify as a qualified medical child support order dependent, that is how we will verify that dependent, so that information would come back to you. However, with that being said, we encourage you to check your records because if a participant supplies a birth certificate, let's say, for a biological child, then that's how that dependent would verify. So it's not always a true picture of who a qualified medical child support order dependent is. And on those who fail to verify, unfortunately, we will have no information, so we won't be able to identify what kind of dependent they are. But following the completion of the project, those that we do validate as having a qualified medical child support order, that information will be available to you to help update records so that maybe a list can be started.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Oh, there you are, Melissa. Oh, good. Thank you. So I think that we have answered this question already, but we'll certainly do so again. If a term dependent either becomes eligible or finds documentation for proof that they are eligible, can he, she be enrolled back on immediately, or do they have to wait for the open enrollment period? And again, our intention is that eligible dependents are covered, so we would do whatever we can to get them re-enrolled, but understand that it may be kind of clunky due to timing of having to disenroll them, and then later if proof is shown that they are eligible to re-enroll them. So there is going to, appear to be a time of ineligibility, but we will make sure that there's no breaks in coverage if that true documentation is provided. So the next question is, so in 2014, the employer will be responsible for collecting these documents for new enrollees. These documents will be sent to AWC with the new enrollment forms, and that is correct. We're going to be coming up with a process, talking internally, we haven't done that yet, of an enrollment form that you collect, and maybe at a later point we give employees so much time to collect the documents, because certainly they're, when they are hired, and also certainly pursuant to your collective bargaining agreements, they are required to have coverage effective maybe the first of the month following date of hire. We will make sure that they're enrolled, but within a certain time period, and we'll come up with these dates and communicate them to you. Documentation, support documentation would be required. Okay, so it looks like comments from Bellingham, Alyssa, Marianne, and Connie, hello. We are concerned about the opt-out verbiage being used. This will be confusing to staff as the city pays an opt-out incentive to opt-out eligible dependents via an internal opt-out form. Is it possible to call it something different, like an unenrollment form?
So, Carol, this is Melissa. I just want to interject here. I believe the cities will just be receiving a report of these dependents and not copies of the actual form. Am I correct in saying that?
So, Melissa, the form that the employee has to fill out to disenroll their dependents, what is that form called?
It is called an opt-out form.
Okay, and that's what their comment is, that it may be confusing to the employee. Do we have the ability to change the title of that form? Is that embedded by chance in your portal system already?
It is. but we can take it away and see if there is something that we can do. I will have to take that back.
Okay. We'll do whatever we can on that. I mean, I think it's clearly a part of this this dependent eligibility verification audit. I think there's a lot of, disconnectors from the city's policy for incentive. We will do whatever we can to change that within a proprietary system that is the Aon Hewitt system. Okay. So thank you for your comments on that. And then the question is, will we be able to see the portal in advance? Melissa, do you want to take that one?
Certainly. We can provide over to the AWC Trust some screenshots of the portal so that you can see images of what the portal will look like to employees. And, of course, if you are one of the employees who has to verify dependents, you'll get your instructions in the first communication. But we will send over some screenshots that will show you what it looks like.
Okay. Great. Okay, so another question from Peggy Hammer. When AWC begins requiring documentation for new hires, what security steps will be taken with these sensitive documents? And again, Peggy, we've not fully vetted out the process, but we too have actually even reconfigured our building and where our files sit and our electronic systems to be HIPAA compliant. And so our intention is to maintain that and maintain non-original documents similar to this audit. Also, the retention of documents would be transitioned to electronic and kept in our electronic archiving system. And those paper copies would be in our secure shredded process. So that's kind of where I see that going. But again, we haven't firmed up the entire process as of itself. That's why we're not implementing it immediately. We're waiting until 1/1/14. Okay, so the next question is, Melissa, I'll let you take this one. If an employee does not respond, will they be dropped from insurance?
Yes. It's the short answer. We will be sending communications to the employee's home. In total, there are 4 calendar-based communications that will go out. There are 2 event-based. But employees who do not respond, ultimately, if they have not responded and verified their dependents by the end of the project, those dependents will be removed from coverage. However, during the grace period of the project, we will be able to provide reporting to the AWC Trust that identifies those participants who have truly not responded to the project. And that includes those employees who have not contacted dependent verification services by the phone, they have not logged into the web portal, and they have not submitted any documentation. So that is a group that can be monitored.
And this is a point of clarification. The employee's coverage continues. They're eligible. It's their dependents that have not proven eligibility that will be discontinued.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so from Keith Larson, hi Keith. Question is, did I hear you say that audits will not be needed every 2 years? And won't you still have to conduct audits periodically for ineligible dependents due to divorce or age? What are your ongoing plans for that? And that's a good question, a good point. Well, certainly not necessarily every 2 years for, as you say, the verification of divorce or domestic partners. Our intention is not to conduct the audit every 2 years. We'll consult with Aon Hewitt what their recommendation would be when we've continued on with a document confirmation process, how prudently it would be to do an audit from here on forward. Melissa, do you have any thoughts on prudent audit timeline?
I do. I can speak to that a little bit. What we typically see are employers who conduct a re-verification, if you will, of spouses and stepchildren primarily, and domestic partners about every 5 years. And so that would be a request to just obtain updated secondary proof of the ongoing relationship. So copies of domestic partner registration or copies of government-issued marriage certificates would not be needed again because we know the relationship was established. We would just need updated proof that the relationship still exists today. But what we are seeing across the board is generally about every 5 years that this re-verification takes place.
Great. Thanks, Melissa, for that professional advice that was in kind of an industry professional advice. Appreciate it. So another question from Elizabeth, Linda, and Jamie. Do you recommend we get the word out now about the verification coming in their home mailboxes? And yes, we do. We have an article slated for our May For Your Health to be mailed on this Thursday, May 2nd, and that article will direct you to the location in our website. We're even including on our website a copy of the envelope of where this information is coming from so that you may communicate to your employees that this is a trusted source, that this is a trusted request for very important documentation, personal health information. So we need to reassure employees that it is a trusted source. So from the envelope to a copy of, I think, the sample amnesty letter, and that's about, and then the team is from Lincolnshire, Illinois. Yeah, and so that's perceived as a trusted source. Hopefully that will be sufficient. If you need any more information on that, let us know. Okay. Next question, will copies of government-issued documents be acceptable, or will copies need to be notarized somehow? How will that work if the employee faxes or uploads the documents? Melissa?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, we are looking only for copies, and the copies of a government-issued marriage certificate or of a filed domestic partner registration certificate do not need to be additionally notarized once the copy is made. What we're looking for primarily, depending on the state of issue, and that will vary, is registration number, record number, court signature. We can often read the seal through the copy in the fax or the upload. We are more frequently seeing individuals take pictures of their documents when they are submitting their documents through the web portal. That is acceptable as well. So we don't need the actual document, nor do we need additional validation of that document's authenticity prior to submission.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Well, there are no further new questions in the queue, so I'll give kind of one more opportunity for you to ask your questions. Now, please don't feel this is speak now or forever hold your peace. We as your staff are available to your questions, so feel free to email us or to call us at 1-800-562-8981 if you have questions after our session today. Any more questions, Mitch? Okay. Well, it looks like we have exhausted all of the questions for the moment. And so, again, we thank you for attending this webinar. We also really appreciate your support in our verification audit. And again, thanks to Melissa for your presentation and for your answers to all of the questions. I hope all of you have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Carol.